Hey everyone, Conor for Forge Intelligence here again today, and today's topic is going to be execution and how it relates to progressive overload. So this is like one of those topics where there seems to be like camps among the industry. There seems to be a progressive overload camp. There seems to be a execution camp, and they both have like their own merit. But I'm going to sort of bring into how they can sometimes do the same thing. And if you do sort of take a step in the sort of execution direction, how can still lead you to more overload, how it can be adjusted, things to consider things such as volume and stuff like that as well. Right, so we're comparing a few different things here. So with today, I've compared not even a really bad form. Like if I had a really bad form, the numbers here would change, but just a moderately bad form. Basically someone that, been chasing weights for a while, they've got one eye in execution, but it's not a big eye. And in time they just try to chase load and a few things that went down the pathway. So the reason I haven't said completely bad form is people will sort of switch off and say, oh, I'm not one of those people that does really bad form. You don't need to. I only consider this moderately bad form. There's no like really shit things going on the lower back. There's not I haven't considered any sort of knee extension in these things. Not even that bad form, and it still applies massively. So with this moderate sloppy row, let's say we're starting, hopefully I'm in camera here, and instead of like a good form, which I'd, for lats more so, consider something like, like so, there's some extension through the back, there's a lean back through the upper back, you're sort of elevating for scapula, and the hands sort of follow up higher. So this mainly happened with like 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, but it does have a massive implication for things such as moment arms and how much tension is distributed to different areas. Now, with these percentages that I'm about to go in, I do understand there is like an isometric component to certain things, but this is more so going to relate to how tension is distributed in the actual moving parts, of the motion. So, with that sort of row we just mentioned, let's take this example. The person in question has done 3 sets of 10 reps at 100 kilos with that sort of form. Again, not too bad, but can improve a thing or two. Just a few, centimeters of way things move going potentially wrong direction. So with that weight, tension has got to go places. So weight, times by Newton, gravity, you got your newtons, you got your tension. That's got to go places. And how you move, functions of the muscle is going to dictate, where that goes. So first thing, we've got that sort of extension of the back. So with this example, nothing too major again. I've considered, of that 100 kilos, about 20% of that is moved through, both, hip extension as well as maybe a little bit of like lumbar extension or spinal extension or hyperextension. With that, there's probably a slight bit of inertia. Now, anytime your tempo moderately changes through the lift, there is going to be an inertia component. So it is really hard to achieve, but it does happen more sometimes than other. And any sort of like quick explosive movement will actually be followed by a little bit of, less force needed to keep it moving. Rule of inertia, it's going to do what it's already doing. You generate a lot of movement, it's going to keep moving for a bit. You push a rock along the ground or you roll along, it's going to keep moving for a little bit until there's like forces that act upon it, right? So you keep doing what it wants to do. That applies a little bit and does actually like to strength curves, which may be a little bit of a different topic again. So it might be a portion where it's really quick, and then because of that, the next sort of part comes a lot easier. And there's no actual forces really going through there. It's actually technically less than 100 kilos at that point. Because you're sort of leaning back and, the shoulders are probably elevating and stuff like that, your upper back / rear delts, teres, all those little things I'm going to subcategorize there, might receive about 30% of that tension, particularly because how the function of the upper back sort of differ to lats in that sort of component. Because you're sort of traveling higher, it's potentially, more chance of, only a slight, flexion of the elbow, slightly more as we carry on higher. The higher you go, imagine like you're going to the face versus like a pullover. So it sort of moves more towards the point of the face side of the spectrum. And from there, we consider about 20% of the actual overall tension will be distributed to lats. I'm not going to go individual lats, it's probably boring now. We're not even going to have it as a factor today. Not going to have knee extensions as a factor. Probably just leave it, simple in that sense. So the absolute intensity, so the weight going through your lats, which is again, at the end of the day, what we're really interested in here, after lat growth or whatever growth. I'll understand. I'll also explain later why, how the rest of it ties into, training and stuff like that. But the absolute intensity is about 20 kilos through your lats. If you multiply that by the 30 reps during across the workout, 3 sets of 10, you got about 600 kilos of tonnage / volume going through the muscle group that we are talking about right now. Now, let's talk about more of the good form thing. So, rule of thumb, when I sort of have people, like let's say in the gym in my practice, move from, chasing weight to sort of just adjusting execution for the better, yet still trying to make progress in all those things, not a complete motor skill acquisition phase, you would see about 70% of the loads used. So, up here, I'll put up 70 kilos for today. Now, the sort of distribution with better forms, things change again. How you move will dictate where the tension goes. So hip / lumbar extension, perfect roll to 0, but this is probably going to be a little bit. Again, we're trying to keep things practical here. We're trying to avoid you guys switching off because, that's not me, or that's impractical. So 5% there. Inertia, again, it's really hard. We've got that, sort of consistent motion and tempo, which is really important there. It's nearly impossible to achieve. So you might see 5% there, but again, a lot better than the stuff over there. Now, because you're probably having more of humerus depression and stuff like that, it's probably going to be less work done by the elbow flexors, your biceps, brachioradialis and brachialis. Your upper back, because of how your scapula and arm is moving, probably won't see as much bias there, especially if we're keeping form, towards the body rather than, up and back. And lats might just see about 55% of the tension there. So what happens to the volume? What happens to the intensity? How is it progressive overload, etc.? So if we multiply 70 kilos there times the 55% of that weight going towards lats, we actually see an absolute intensity, so how much weight is going through our lats, at 38.5 kilos. So if you guys out there thinking, in that scenario, and you're just trying to chase the next number on the bar, let's say you're trying to get, to 102.5 kilos, that's a 2.5% jump. This is like a 90% jump. It's a freaking huge one. And it's just through changing of execution, and your weight through the muscles went up exponentially, even though overall weight has went down. Now, what's to do with volume and stuff like that? Let's say we kept it at 3 sets of 10 at 70 kilos times that, 55% efficiency, I guess we'll call it for lats. We'd actually see 1,155 kilos done. Let's say you're in the volume tracking crowd. That's potentially going from, 10 sets a week for a body part with this sort of form. And you progressively overload, same weight, all that stuff in this hypothetical world, to 19 sets. That's a huge jump, and it's just through this manipulation of execution. But I also just did a little bit of maths before, and I found out that, funnily enough, you can achieve great overload with less total reps, less total weight. This is sort of the big thing about efficiency, right? So you can actually do 16 reps as a total workout and get a better effect in terms with 70 kilos than over here. It is actually more overload once I equate the tonnage for lats. So another question might be, okay, 70 kilos versus 100 kilos. There's obviously weight going elsewhere in these scenarios. Why don't I want elsewhere? Why don't I want to chase growth across the board? Well, with hypertrophy, even with strength, you've got these, you've got volume thresholds and you've got intensity thresholds. You need a certain amount of weight to actually, change things up to sort of set along the catalyst for strength and hypertrophy. So, example of this person doing 3 sets of 10, 100 kilos. Let's say they could deadlift, 3x5, whatever, 200 kilos. I haven't really done the maths there, but okay. Probably an RDL is probably better for this example. So they can do, let's say 160 for an RDL. Same sort of weight. How effective is 20 kilos going to be through the, glutes and lower back at that stage? Okay, can handle 160 versus can handle, 20 kilos there. It's probably not enough to hit that intensity thresholds. In fact, we know sort of the intensity thresholds. Yeah, research varies and go to failure is another thing, but again, failure in such a broad movement it's hard to define. You probably need about 55 to 65% of 1 RM. 20 kilos for someone that can RDL 160 kilos most certainly does not hit that sort of threshold. So what is that sort of weight through all that stuff? Well, it's actually junk volume. So it's not something that contributes towards adaptation, but it is something that brings fatigue. Now for that same RDL workout you can do later on in the week, your strength hasn't got better for it, but you're walking with more fatigue because of how you've done your rows. Same goes for elbow flexors. Maybe not enough to along the catalyst for growth, but now your bicep curl performance goes down. How much has that really helped you? Probably not a lot. In fact, you might actually get more injuries because of it. So this is just the mechanical tension side of things. And funnily enough, if we actually consider sort of the mechanisms of hypertrophy, let's say the Brad Schoenfeld paper, you had, what did you have? You had mechanical tension, muscle damage, and metabolic stress. Now, and we can sort of add the pump in there a little bit as well. So this is just the mechanical tension side of things. Damage, it almost ticks the same boxes, same theory applies. For the occlusion / metabolic stress / pump effect, it probably applies even more. So with that occlusion effect of, oxygen, can't get to the muscle, lactate accumulating, blah, 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 you've got to consider, okay, that sort of lockdown pattern happens, but it's not happening in one area. It's happening in a shitload of areas. That sort of blood rush, those, metabolite accumulations in one area is a lot more spread out. Suddenly that pump is a lot worse, which we know is, indicative of hypertrophy. That metabolic stress is worse, as well as a massive tick for mechanical tension. So if you are someone that, has sort of jumped across to the execution side of things, you'd have to be an idiot not to have overloaded by now, if you consider all these things. Again, less reps per set, less sets, less weight, we still achieve progressive overload in terms of tonnage. And the absolute intensity through the target muscle. And as for the muscles, that weren't the target muscles, there's less junk volume going through them. There's less wasted fatigue. So I guess this is sort of one of the reasons why understanding anatomy, understanding loading, and understanding, how to, target that anatomy with the loading is so important. So look into anatomy, guys. Look into, your physics, biomechanics, all that stuff. And this stuff's all going to make sense. I haven't seen anyone do a video about this before, but let's say, you were on one side of the argument with what we're talking about just then. Send them through this video. And suddenly, the extra 2.5 kilos in the bar, we really see how that, compares to better execution. Or for people just waiting around doing nothing, we know overload's important. Is there a marriage of the two? Yeah, but it almost always starts off at the best execution possible, because that is, for 9 out of 10 people, better overload already. So I hope that was an interesting video. Please share this one around, because I haven't seen anyone talk about it before. And I think, you, especially advanced coaches and how it funnels down, can get a lot out of this. Something to consider, and hopefully it is maybe, since I'm just one person, and then to one perspective, at least, of the execution versus weight in the bar argument. All right, thanks guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Conor for Forge Intelligence, out.